Good morning. This is Dan Rodden, and this morning we're inviting you to join us for our Sunday Bible class. Lee and I actually just sat out on the patio and have a Bible study by doing what the Bible says to do, which is when you get together, read the Bible. And I find that doesn't happen very often, so Lee and I do it. Lee, are you there?
I'm here. Ready to read.
Okay, well, we got you your music going, and do you know what verses we're reading this morning? Now, what we're reading,
let me
explain what we're reading, because this is our first time. We actually, at this time, we read different books together, and today we're reading through the Life of Christ in Stereo. Now we're not reading through the whole thing, we're just reading a little section. And what this is taking the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and going through that as a historical novel. The reason I like this book, not one word is left out of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, and not one word is added. It was an older man that I learned about when I was younger that spent most of his adult life putting this together by just taping the pieces together. And he solved some really interesting historical problems, of which we'll learn as we're going through it. But I find this is a great way, because we're to be like Christ, and this is a great way to do this and find out how Christ lived. So as we're doing this, we will let you be participating in what we're doing, and we hope you enjoy it as much as I do. Now, the first thing we always do is Lee reads, and I interrupt and we talk, and you're welcome to enter in as we post this on Facebook and ask questions, and we'll interact with you that way. So, Lee, where are we reading today?
Today we are going to read about John the Baptist is martyred, and we're reading Matthew 14, 1 through 13a, Mark 6, 14 through 29, and Luke 9, 7 through 9.
Okay.
Now at the time King Herod the Tetrarch heard of all the things being done by Jesus, for his name was becoming famous. And Herod was perplexed and said, John I beheaded, so who is this of whom I am hearing such things? For by some it was being said that John the Baptizer had been raised from the dead. Others were saying that Elijah had appeared. Others also that a prophet like one of the old prophets had arisen. But Herod, on hearing it, said to his servants, This is John the Baptist, whom I beheaded. He has risen from the dead, and this is why these mighty powers are working in him.
This is very interesting. This is like our state government, you could say, here in America. It would be like the governor of our state had beheaded one of the citizens because one of the citizens had told people that this governor, Herod, king, he was king, but he was not king of the whole country.
Yeah,
just his era in the Roman Empire. This king was he actually came. He beheaded him because John the Baptist said, "You can't sleep with your
brother's wife."
Yeah, that's what it was. I just went blank. I'm doing a lot of things, pushing buttons, trying to get this all together. But and so now he's killed him, and he knows he's dead. But now he's nuts. He's paranoid because when you do evil.
During that time, there's some place I remember reading about the brother's wife, and I'm blank on her name right now. But I think they were really into occultic practices too, summoning.
Most people
all kinds of stuff like that. So to him, to think that there was like a quote-unquote ghost that had come back to haunt him with all the guilt that he had on him, it makes a lot of sense that he thinks this is
well, Jesus had actually called this guy some names when many people get upset. when you call people names, but Jesus called people names. And what's interesting here, I think, Lee, is that as he suppressed the truth, he suppressed John the Baptist's message. He finally suppressed it in the ultimate way by killing him, and now he's totally insane. So he goes after Jesus. So let's see what he says.
Okay, so for Herod had himself sent forth and arrested John, and had bound him in prison for Herodias' sake. That's the
Herodias was the queen.
wife,
Yeah, we can't ever remember these names, especially as we
his
get
brother
older.
Philip's wife, because he had married her. So he married his brother's wife.
Yeah.
Okay.
In other words, he was a mess.
And for John kept saying to Herod, "It is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife." So Herodias held a grievance against him and wanted to kill him, but she could not because she didn't have power, right?
Well, here's what's interesting is realize that you wives, and Lee doesn't realize this sometimes, she does pretty much now, that they have great influence on the things they say to their husbands, and it causes them to do things. And my dog's barking in the background. It's okay. We're not going to stop our Bible study because it happens. Lee's worried about it. We have dogs. We're sitting out on the patio. There's birds. There's going to be cars go by. It's okay. It's just what happens.
All right. Well, let's go and read them. Were you
But
not finished?
yeah, Herodias, this woman is having great influence and actually is the cause of him going nuts. Because she kept bugging him about this guy that's saying they're bad, which they were bad.
Yeah.
So Herod's badness, if it would just been him, probably wouldn't have been a big a deal. But she just pushes it and pushes it. Yeah.
Okay, so she wanted to kill him, but she couldn't. For Herod, and this is interesting, for Herod held John in awe, knowing him to be a righteous and holy man. That's really interesting.
Yeah, see, Herod, there's a good example of how far a woman can push a man. And it's her guilt that is really the biggest problem here. He's almost doesn't care.
Now, this next part is interesting, too. So let me start this sentence. For Herod held John in awe, knowing him to be a righteous and holy man. So he was keeping him safe, and when he heard him, did many things told him, and kept listening gladly. Even when minded to put him to death, he feared the people, for they held him to be a prophet. So
what do you think of that?
Well, he knew John the Baptist was a good man. He knew he was, and it says that he kept him safe, and he did a lot of things that John the Baptist told him.
So he was kind of a good church guy.
Oh yeah, kind of.
He attended synagogue and gave his tithes, and he was part of the Jewish culture, and he really was kind of like probably a pretty good guy, except what happened, well, because he protected him. See, if you look at it as a political thing, the king's protecting you. The king's protecting John. This happened from his birth until probably the last 6 or 8 months of his life. Mm-hmm. And now, suddenly he flips, but he flips not because he flipped, because he was
adulterous.
Well, because his sin was sex outside of marriage, or married to adulterous situation, which was even worse than adultery.
I don't know if the brother was not dead. That's why it was wrong. So the brother
it was just sin. It was sin. His sin was over here in the sexual area, and he was getting his sex, so he was happy. But she wasn't happy because he was telling her John the Baptist.
Telling her she was a sinner.
Yeah.
And needed to repent.
See, I find this kind of similar parallel in our culture. Can you think of anyone that's like this? Any politician at the current? This is what Newt Gingrich did.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Newt Gingrich was sleeping with his. He was really a good leader, and he did a lot of good things, and then suddenly he just wimped out. And what he did, his wife. He was cheating on her with his secretary, and that went on for quite a while. Nobody knew, but there were hints, and then he wimped out. Well, then he dumped his other wife, and now he's got this new one, and she kind of controls him. He's a really great guy, a good churchgoer. Now he's left the faith. He's left the biblicism and become a Catholic, and now he's following the Pope. I mean, he's gone down the tubes of really some bad stuff.
Yeah, he's not doing good either. Yeah. All right, you ready to go
My
on?
wife thinks he's wonderful, though.
No, I really don't like him at all. I hate a man who marries and cheats and then marries again and cheats and marries
And then
again.
tells everybody how beautiful his wife is, which isn't his wife. It is an adulterous situation. That's what John the Baptist was saying.
And
This is adultery.
There was no good reason why he left his wife.
And the reason, well, Newt
Gingrich. There's no good reason.
Oh, the
why
reason
he
was
left
she was a looker.
No. I am saying he had I think he's been married 3 or 4 times. I'm not sure. But there's no good reason why he left the first one.
Well, the first one was kind of before he became a Christian. People will forgive that sometimes. But this second one was someone who was, she was a good woman. And it was faithful to him, and it was seemed like a good wife. He bragged about her all the time.
He did. I remember that.
Remember how he would go on vacations with her?
When I saw him with this new wife, I thought, who is she?
And now he gets out there and pushes her books and this new wife's books and videos, and he pretends it's all okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's not all okay, and it's one of the reasons our nation is under judgment because of the moral character of the leadership.
Yeah.
And Newt Gingrich is a brilliant man, and he's pretty much on our side, kind of like Herod was pretty much on our side, or John the Baptist's side, until he finally got ticked off, and his wife got to him. And that's why I don't like Newt Gingrich, although he has some brilliant ideas, and I'll listen to him and I'll think about him because I know what his problem is.
Okay, going on. But when an opportune day arrived, and Herod on his birthday held a banquet for his courtiers and high captains and the chief men of Galilee, Herodias' own daughter came in and danced in their midst. And she gave pleasure to Herod and those at table with him.
See,
For which cause the king said to the maiden, "Ask of me anything you wish, and I will give it to you."
This is where sexual
is this
sin.
The dance of the 7 veils. Is this the
I don't
Dance
know.
of the 7
Maybe.
Veils? I
Maybe.
heard that movie
I've heard
and
that.
everything. I
Yeah.
don't know if that's what it is.
It could be, but it's this is a good example of how many great men get seduced, and Newt Gingrich is the one that comes to my mind the closest. Actually, Bill Clinton is probably about the same. That's why we're all sick of Washington, because they're all a bunch of whoremongers. And there's only 1 or 2 that are really standing in truth and moral character that I can observe. And see, one of the things we do in our Bible study, for you that are just listening for the first time, you're talking about politics. Well, the Bible applies. And that's where, looking at Jesus, he lived in a real world. He had the federal government, he had the state government. The federal government was the Roman Empire, the state government was Herod. You had then the local governors and congressmen, which was the Senate, or not the Senate, the Sanhedrin, and they were a government. And you had parties, you had the Pharisees and the Sadducees, just like the Republicans and Democrats.
Yeah,
you have the same thing going on there.
It's interesting that so many people don't want to talk about politics in regard to the Bible. They just want it to be religious. But the Bible is, everything's political in the Bible. It's just, gaining a country. That's political.
Well, when you say
Jesus
is king,
that's political.
That's political.
Yeah.
And his law is king over us.
Yep.
And that's why we elect officials, but the King of Kings, the King of Parliaments, the King of Presidents is Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
That's political. That's why the secularists hate Christians.
That's why a little saying that a lot of people put up on Facebook is, no matter who is president, Jesus is king. And that's true. No matter who is a dictator, no matter who is a prince, Jesus is king.
Well, and that's where at the American Revolution, one of the sayings that went around is, there's no king but Jesus.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
And that was talking of the king in England.
Part of the reason that George Washington did not want to become a king.
That's part of it, yeah.
Because he declared that there's no king but Jesus.
Okay, go on and read what this Herodias woman, this horriblest woman did.
Well, this is the daughter. This is the daughter now.
Oh,
She gave this dance, and Herod said, "Ask of me anything you wish, and I will give it to you." And he swore to her with an oath.
So this is even worse. Let me
This
break.
is the daughter.
This is
Well, it
this
says
is
she gave them pleasure. So I don't
yeah.
know.
This
We
isn't
don't know
this isn't
exactly
his
what
wife.
that means, but
This is his
we can have a
daughter. This is
stepdaughter.
like incest almost.
Stepdaughter,
This
yeah.
is horrible. This guy's a pervert, but he's a good guy because he protected. See, that's how these politicians work.
Yeah.
They'll be good guys for a while until they can't get their jollies.
Yeah.
And then they'll do what they want. They'll kill whoever they need to. But go ahead.
Okay, so he says, "Ask of me anything," and he swore to her with an oath, saying, "No matter what you may ask of me, I will give it to you, up to half of my kingdom." This must have been one heck of a dance she did.
Pretty good one.
Then she went out and said
Too bad
to her
we didn't have
mother-
videos back then, huh?
Yeah, so she goes out. Her mother apparently is...
Probably would have been a good porn movie.
I'm rolling my eyeballs.
I know.
Okay, so she goes out. So the mother isn't even in there. The daughter went in and did this dance. Okay, she goes out and talks to her mother and said, "What shall I ask for?" And she, the mother, said, "The head of John the Baptist." So she came in, the daughter, she came in at once with haste to the king and said, "I desire that you give me here at once, on a platter, the head of John the Baptist."
You know, it's very interesting. I never realized this was the daughter. I guess I've read this 10,000 times. Not that many.
Well, there's too many she's and
Yeah,
he's.
but that's why I like this Life of Christ in Stereo. It tends to walk us through a good historical account. But this is even worse than the wife doing this dance. This guy is really caught up in sexual perversion that causes him to take political action that is evil. He takes the bribe. But go ahead. That's what George Washington said. Don't take the bribe.
And the king was very unhappy, but because of his oaths and those at table with him, he would not refuse her. And immediately the king sent a guardsman and ordered that his head should be brought and presented. So he went and beheaded John in the prison, and his head was brought on a platter and presented to the maiden, and she brought it to her mother. And when the disciples heard of it, they came and took up his body and buried it in a tomb. Then they went and told Jesus, and when Jesus heard of it, he withdrew from where he was. And that's the end of that section right there.
Well, you know, this is a very interesting section because it gives us an insight into the real political, social, moral. There is no separation of the civil society and the political society. And you brought something up before that I think we should probably end with today in our study, and that was the idea that we don't talk about politics and religion. I don't know where that came from, but I do know it didn't come from our founding fathers. It isn't American. I personally believe it's a tactic of the secularists to silence the Christians, because there's only really two things worth talking about: politics and religion. They're eternal. There will always be politics, even in eternity. In other words, you'll be ruling and interacting with people. Now, there won't be a fallenness to it then, but there will still have to be working through and around people in a good way.
I have one more thing to say here
about
this. The last sentence, when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from where he was. And I think that indicates how much he
was burdened.
He cared about John the Baptist. And I think he also realized, he's dealing with
He's a real human being.
He's a real human being.
That's limited himself, and he's not exercising his all-knowing, all power, and all presence.
John the Baptist from the dead, right?
He's being led by the Spirit, but the Father declared to Jesus, he must decrease and you must increase.
And I think that Jesus, this is an indication.
And it hurt him.
Doesn't say for sure, but I think it's an indication of, how much he cared. I mean, because when people mourn, they usually withdraw for a time period.
Well, death is later in the Bible is called the enemy of God, the last enemy of God to be done away.
And as Christians, that's really important. I know, I just want to interject it. I've had a lot of friends on Facebook over the last couple of weeks who've had friends or relatives die.
Or even dogs.
Yeah, even our dogs. We care about them. But
even your parakeet.
But, you know, the thing that that Christians know for sure is that they'll see those people again. They have that assurance, and that is, you know, that is really a comfort. So,
well, I think this is why I like this Life of Christ in Stereo. It goes through this. Remember, it's not just one verse we're reading or one book.
Yeah,
it's these books.
Three sections of the Bible together.
Can you read the three again?
Matthew 14, 1 through 13a, Mark 6, 14 through 29, and Luke 9, 7 through 9.
And these verses all fit together in the historical development, because all this happened in real-time space history.
Which is important to remember in itself. That's a thing that, you know, non-Christians say, well, it's just a bunch of stories by people, but there's three different accounts, and they all tell the story together from different eyewitnesses.
That's why we like to do this, because it helps us understand how to talk about politics and religion to our friends, and how to talk about the civil society, and how to talk about personal life, because Jesus is Lord of all those things.
Yep.
Right?
Yep, he sure is.